Welcome back to the Nullified Take channel here on YouTube, where I've got the TNT takes for you on Australian Survivor Heroes vs Villains episode 17. That's right, I'm back with my top 5 takes. But before we get into it, please consider subscribing, please consider hitting the like button and putting the notification bell on so you can be informed the next time that I do drop one of these videos. A lot more content to come for Survivor lovers. Obviously, Survivor 44 in the US have just started, and we also have some players coming up in the next couple of weeks. Omara's confirmed this week as a guest on the channel when we recap and review episode 2 for Survivor 44. Alright, let's get into this episode. Australian Survivor just continues to deliver episode after episode, and this episode starts off with the shiz, that is Liz and Shani, having a conversation on the beach. They catch a crab together, they eat together, they sleep together, they laugh together. These two are inseparable. They're probably as close as you can get to a showmance on the show without them actually dating. And clearly this is something that should not be taken lightly. I think the fact that George was in on the Spice Girls have kept them safe to a certain degree, where if their names were ever going to be mentioned, George would have cut that short very quickly. But in this episode, we find out that Shani and Liz are more than willing to cut the cord on George. They know that they're the two that needs to go to the end, and they recognize George's game at this point, and that if he was to get to the end, it would be very difficult to beat him. Now, I do think that Shani's got such a great social game, and she probably would have still stood a chance if she just played with George in the game, but in her assessment, George is the biggest threat in the game, and they need to make a move on him. They also talk about some of the other players, and Jerry's name gets mentioned as someone that can go to the end that can't win, as well as Simon's name. Now, I did call both of those in my power rankings and live that I did last week. I said Simon would be a great person to pull to the end because I don't think anybody's going to vote for him. Well, if he continues to win his way with immunities to the end, maybe he does have some sort of a story coming up and something that he could point back to say, well, strategy didn't work, but I did become the beast and I found a way to the end in this game. And maybe he does get some respect for that. With Jerry, it's an interesting one because Jerry, again, is seen as someone that can go to the end, but probably won't win. And I know that people in my live last week said that Jerry should be seen as more of a threat. And we'll talk a bit about Jerry later on in this top 5 takes, because he is still a big part of this episode, and we're seeing him strategize with George quite a lot throughout this episode. Now, number 2, George finds out about the shiz. They stay back at camp, they steal some rice, a really funny scene with Liz and Shani looking over each other's back to make sure no one catches them, and George does something that he's very well known for. He's a sneaky player. He walks off, walks back around, and is seen somewhere behind camp listening in on a conversation, and through this, he finds out that the shiz is a thing, which to him is a shock because he's never heard the name before. He thought it's the Spice Girls, but now he's aware that there is an alliance within an alliance, and he is the third wheel in that group. So this makes George, this whole episode, extremely paranoid for good reason, because he doesn't know when a player such as Shani will come after him. Like he says, this is her third time playing. She's someone who knows how to play the game. She's got experience. She's even got more experience than the king himself. And at this point, she is the player with the record for the most days out there on the island. You can see this really weighing on George's mind. They have this scene where all of them go to bed and go and sleep, and he is out on the beach walking up and down, thinking about what this means for his game moving forward, because in his mind, the Spice Girls was the alliance that he wanted to take as deep as he could in the game. This is obviously mixing everything up, and he now has to think about a different strategy to the end game. And I think that in some ways George has only got himself to blame for this, because even though his social game has been better this season, even though strategically he is still the mastermind that he's always been, his management of his threat level has been appalling, and everybody knows that he's going to win the game if he gets to the end. It's openly being mentioned many times in the season so far. So it does make you wonder, does George even get to the end? Does he have enough gas in the tank to get to the end with so many people on the island knowing that he is the person that they need to get rid of? Alright, takeaway number 3. Simon becomes the beast at the immunity challenge, and he wins another one. Now, this was a fun immunity challenge. They started off with having to land 3 sandbags on a little platform that was swinging. And then after that, they had to throw the sandbags, hit some rungs off a podium or a a structure, and then they had to climb over a bridge, and at the end, they were tethered to a platform that they had to place 10 discs on, and they had to move back and forth. And Simon shows that when it comes to being patient, he's not patient when it comes to his strategy, but when it comes to being patient in a challenge, he can clutch it out. And I've been impressed by Simon's performance this season so far. I do think he needs to continue to win because it's one of the reasons he's a target now. He doesn't add any strategic value. He doesn't have any friends in the game. So the only thing that he adds is being a challenge beast. And obviously, players such as George notices that, and he wants to target both Sean and Simon in this episode. He even has this conversation at the immunity challenge with Nina, and he says, we need Sean and Simon not to win, because if they do win, you become an option, and I don't want that. So, great work by George throughout this episode to always work on those fringe numbers and continue to make sure that there's options there for him if he wants to pivot or twist in the game. And I think Nina really appreciated that as well, because that's going to come in clutch for him later on in this episode. But big win here for Simon. And I've got to say, at this point, I watch a show called The Challenge, which is all about challenges and you can win your way to the end. I think Simon would have been a great addition to The Challenge. I endorse him going over to The Challenge. I think it would be a lot of fun to watch. All right, takeaway number 4, they go back to camp. Now, Simon is no longer an option, which would infuriate George, who was taking everything very personal with Simon turning against the Alliance. He wanted retribution. And due to this, they now have to split the vote 3-3 on both Nina and Sean, and they bank on Nina and Sean voting for each other, which means that Simon ultimately would have the power in the game to choose who he wants to vote out. But George doesn't like that, and being the controlling mastermind that he is, forces Simon into a corner by saying, hey, if you want to outlast whoever is going to stay in the game out of those two, you need to vote out who we want you to vote out in the game. And Simon has got very little to offer. So George makes him turn on his idol, his survivor idol, Sean, and he says, you need to vote out Sean, I want Nina in the game. And it looks like everything is Gucci at this point. The Alliance finds out about this deal that George has brokered with him, and everybody is happy, but George thinks about this thing, and he's like, Shani is coming for me, I am not in this alliance, I need to make a move now, I need to move before she moves. And this whole episode was brilliant because it had this great soundtrack that kind of made it feel like a horror movie almost, or like this epic battle between royalties. You know, it kind of felt like the Meghan Markle and Harry and royalty mess drama all over again, because we had some royalty blood that was going to get spilled in this episode. He goes and talks to Jerry. He says to Jerry, we need to move on Shani tonight. And am I thinking crazy, or is this the move? And Jerry tries to talk him down. He says, listen, it's too early, let's not do it. And this is where Jerry is interesting, because we've seen these conversations with George and Jerry happening a lot out there on the island, which to me says that Jerry is his confidant, probably his closest confidant with Haley at this point, who he also goes and talks to. And I think the reason that he really enjoys Jerry is because Jerry's got wisdom, and Jerry is a very calm and logical player. So someone that can balance the chaos that is going on in his mind when he's thinking at 1,000 miles an hour. Jerry can just bring him back down. But this time Jerry can't talk him out of this move, because he does get Haley on board, and we know that Haley is coming for George in this game. So Haley is all on board because she knows taking out Shani is taking out one of his shields in the game, someone that has saved him twice up until this point in the game. And she says, let's play this game, let's do it, and the plan is on. So Shani, on the other hand, she is feeling uncomfortable before they go into this specific tribal council. She doesn't like the 3-3 vote. She has a conversation with Liz, her closest confidant, and she says, I don't feel good about this. Something is off. And Liz just tells her to calm down, be relaxed, it's all good. And I've got to say, Shani had great instincts this whole season, and I don't understand. It's frustrating to me that she listened to Liz, who hasn't been shown to have the greatest instincts in the game as of yet. Like, I don't feel like Liz has done anything massive gameplay-wise or move-wise to say, man, she's had great instincts. We need to listen to her at this spot. Shani should have always listened to herself. All right, takeaway number 5. As we head to Tribal Council, Nina gets approached by George. He is the ace up his sleeve, and he has a conversation with her, and he says, Nina, I need you to vote for Shani in this round, but keep it quiet. And Nina is all in, because now she's a potential working option for George in the game, and I think this could be a change to Nina's game. She's going to have to cut herself from Sean. I don't think that George wants anything to do with Sean deep in this game. He will still target Sean and Simon probably next to make sure that a lot of challenge beasts are out of the game going into the final stage. But Nina's potentially going to become that extra option for him when he's looking for people to work with. And in this case, in George's mind, he's got still Jerry, Matt, Haley, and potentially now Nina if Liz does not want to play ball, because Liz has just lost her mentor in the game, and you could see by the end of this episode, when Shani gets voted out, Liz is fuming. She is really annoyed and angry at this situation. So we've seen her go head to head with George a few times in the past. Will she be able to control her emotions? Because both her and Shani had at times played very emotional in this game. Will she be able to pull that back to use George to get to the end? Because I don't think there is a way for her to do this on her own. We have not seen the strategic chops from Liz up until this point to show us that she can go up against the king. I think she needs to play with him, and I think she needs to go back to him with her tail between her legs and try and salvage what is left of this broken up girl band. Lastly, I also did want to mention that George, when he votes for Shani, saying that I wanted to show you that a strategic game always beats a social game, is such a brutal line when he's voting out his bestie with the heart in the game. The guy is an absolute cold-hearted killer in this game. And he takes out Shani here, says that, thank you for teaching me your social game while I still have my strategic game to outplay you in this spot. George has been amazing to watch this season. He has been an absolute character, but I think the end is near. And the reason I think the end is near for him is because his target is just so big in this game. Surely they cannot let him go all the way to the end and win this season. If he does, he may go down as the most dominant winner in the history of the show. That's it for now, guys. Grab your torches, head back to camp. I'll catch you guys tomorrow night when I talk about episode 18. Bye.